Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. We've dedicated this podcast to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, and that's the purpose is a servant's heart. And when you do that, you can make an impact and difference in your world. Imagine doing that every day of your life. How would your life change? I know it's changed my life, and you're going to listen to my guest. I know it's changed his life, because that's why he's on the show, and he's going to talk about words, how words can be such a servant's heart tool that we can use to really make a difference. We also designed this show to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you through our guests, so you walk away with something that you can, again, make an impact and a difference. And your call to action today is, I want you to think how you're going to serve yourself first and others today, and what impact you want to create today. It could be small. It could be helping somebody put their groceries in their grocery store, or giving $1 million to your favorite charity. It doesn't matter. A servant's heart doesn't have a scoreboard. Just take the call to action and serve today. And with that, I want to thank our incredible partner, Pantheon Alliance. Would you like to be part of a community of high-income earners, successful entrepreneurs who are impacting and changing the world with their expertise and their thought leadership? If you want more information on the Pantheon Alliance, reach out to me and I'll get you more information. As I said, impact and making a difference in the world is so powerful. It's fun to do. We're coming close to Christmas. It's like Christmas gifts every day if you want to so choose that. But your words you use to do that servant's heart can make a difference. So my guest is a word expert. Kind of an interesting title. I like that. But he ties in the servant's heart to that. Frank, I want to welcome you to this incredible show.
Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
You know, we were talking before the show. We had such a great conversation. As I said, let's jump on words, how they can be positive and they can be negative.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about recently. I mean, there's lots of examples. I think, this in election year, it's especially common to see. I think, we've seen it for a lot of years. And one thing I noticed the other day, I was flipping through social media, and I came across a post, and somebody had found, it was kind of a funny picture. It was of an old kind of Nissan truck, one of the small ones, parked right next to a truck of the same color, which is one of the big trucks you see, probably like an F-350, or, it was double the size of the truck. And it's funny. It's like a funny looking picture. So the comment or the post that I saw about it was somebody riffing on it, going, "Oh, look, making a joke about how the trucks had gotten deformed and stuff." But what I didn't realize when I clicked through was actually someone else had posted it, and the original post was just a scathing kind of condemnation of the newer truck. So I said this to a friend of mine who's big into trucks, and he's like, everything they said there is wrong. The trucks today are actually far more fuel efficient than they were before. He kind of started listing off all these things. I'm not a truck guy, so I can't remember everything he said, but it incensed him, right? And what it made me think about is, of all the things we can go about and see, and then go about and share with the world, speak about, talk about, write about, why would we make decisions to share something scathing, negative, a condemnation? What are we trying to achieve with that? There's a time and a place to give condemnations. There's probably even a time and a place to be scathing. But it feels to me like that's probably the exception to the rule. So a big thing, I'm a big believer and comes out with the people that I work with. I love people who have constructive stories. They're out there creating things, right? You use the word positive. They're creating, and that's always a positive thing. They're allowing room for growth rather than trying to take people down, make snide comments, things that really don't move a conversation forward, certainly don't move people forward. And I think tend to kind of put a lid on us where we stop noticing what's around us and all the beautiful things there are to see and talk about. So that's how does that strike you? What comes up for you when I share that?
Well, I love what you said about growth, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, if I do a scathing comment, a negative comment to you, like your home is a mess, it's terrible, why'd you buy that home? How do you respond? Now you got to be defensive. In football vernacular, you've got to be back. You're back on your heels.
Mhm.
How can you carry that growth forward in that conversation with that? Now you're going to go back and forth about stuff that it's only what you think. But if I said, man, that's a beautiful home, when did you buy it? Now we have a growth conversation, which is what you said.
Yeah.
We get to learn. Maybe we just met. We get to learn, oh, I bought it 2 years ago and I put this room here. Positive on top of positive, it stacks. To me, a scathing comment just is like the stop at a stoplight or a stop sign, and it stops. It stops the whole conversation, the whole servant's heart. So I love how you said that. But it's interesting. Now let's talk about books and the fear of books, because we talked about before the show, you love helping people who go, what a daunting task. Talk about how a book can be so positive and not negative.
That's a great question. I mean, I think at the essence, a book is a positive when you can engage somebody's attention and get them to read from beginning to end. There are probably some harmful books that do that, but not a lot. Usually, if you can keep people's attention, there's something there that's gripping them, that's getting them to read every single page, right? There's the idea of a page turner, right? And a lot of nonfiction books aren't necessarily page turners, but if you can write a compelling book, you're really taking your reader on a journey, right? And you're keeping them engaged, and they can tell you after they've done how they felt about your book, right? That's not necessarily a judgment. It doesn't mean your book was good or bad. They can tell you what they got out of that. And so I think that's where a book comes in and can be such a powerful tool, partly because of the time required. Most books require multiple sittings, partly because we're busy. We don't have hours to just spend every day reading a book. Even it's kind of part of my professional capacity is to do a lot of reading. But I'm not sitting down reading books every day in their entirety, right? You're going chapter by chapter. And that's actually a real gift, I think, because there's an opportunity for growth when you're taking that journey. You're taking it in pieces, going out in the world, coming back to that book, allowing you to hopefully see the world in a different way, see new things that you hadn't noticed before, in a way that I think, I'm not. There's a place for social media. There's a place for blog posts, emails, what have you. It's a different experience when we sit down to a book. Something's been crafted to have a beginning and an end, varying degrees of substance in the middle, to take us on a journey. Really, I tell people that books are really question explorations. There's a question that they want to explore, and there's probably some answers in there, but really the key is the question, right? And to give that in that kind of longer format, I think is a real gift to the reader.
And you take the fear out. I'm writing a book, so I'm kind of in that mode right now. Not a lot of people know that. Just something I don't like to, hey, I'm writing a book, it's do what you do type of thing. But journey is an interesting word, because that's what you're doing, no matter if it's a personal development book, it's a nonfiction fiction, it's a story of my life, it's a journey. But I want you to talk about legacy, because that's why I'm writing a book. I want to affect servant heart lives forever. What's your thoughts on legacy in books?
That's a good question. Yeah. Maybe can I get you to define legacy for me a little bit further? Because that can mean a couple of things.
Absolutely. asking me something the audience is thinking. So I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to give it to somebody else, whatever way I get it to people. And that message sits on somebody's coffee table, bookshelf, wherever, school, that people have access to this message or journey for as long as that book's sitting there, which could be years on top of years. That type of legacy, making a difference when you're gone.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the beautiful things about a book is it certainly has the capacity to outlive its authors.
Yeah.
My life has been changed by people who I've never met.
Yeah.
Some of them who were alive when I read their books, many who were not. My favorite author is a poet named W.H. Auden. I have never met him. He passed away long before I was born. But I've devoured his work since I was in a junior in college, and continue to find a lot of inspiration and empowerment there, right? Because when we read, we're really having a conversation. It's not an information download. So the book you're writing, Steve, you have things to say, right? And your job as an author is to say those things as best you can, to get clear on what you're talking about and make sure that what you put in there carries that through line, right? Relates to the point and has a clear beginning and end, right? And a book is a completed thing.
Yeah.
And yet when I sit down to read your book, right, there's two voices. I'm hearing your voice and I've got my voice in my head. And so the great thing is that we have this opportunity to have conversations with people. And part of that brings up, there's some responsibility of the reader. How well do we read, that sort of thing? But just without even thinking about it, I don't have to think about whether or not I'm having a conversation with you when I read your book. I am, by engaging with it. As I read your thoughts, I'm not simply downloading your thoughts into my brain. I'm actually interrogating them. I'm going through them. I'm deciding what I like, what I don't like, and maybe I'm getting stopped by a question you ask or a statement you make, and I'm thinking about it, right? And any writer wants that to happen, right? Mm-hmm. That's engagement. That's somebody who's like taking what you've written seriously and going, this is something that it becomes a part of me, right? We get some of that into us. There's an author named Alan Jacobs. He refers to reading books, especially books from the past. He's a big believer in reading books outside of our time. Uses the phrase breaking bread with the dead, which I think is something he's stolen from actually that same poet, W.H. Auden. But I love that idea, right? Where in a book, in this kind of piece of writing, we get to have a conversation, a meal, as it were, with people not like us, who show us things about ourselves that we can't see from our blind spots. And that happens whether the author is dead or not. That's an experience that's always available to us when we sit down to read a book.
Frank, you nailed it. My mind is spinning right now because I'm thinking Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I read chapter 4 every month. It's Law of Increase. I use that in my keynote speak, those words. And he's been long gone, but his legacy lives on, and you nailed it. And audience, think about that. I want you to think about, here's your call to action. Think about a book you read that the person's passed away and how they made you feel. That in the Cliff Notes is the power of a book. Let's talk about words now.
Yeah.
You mentioned it, books, but let's get into blogs and social media, newsletters, all the different ways we communicate with words, even verbally. How they could really make a difference. Is there a difference in each way we communicate, how we use words?
Wow, that's a big question, and a really good one. I think that I probably don't think about that as often as I ought to. I think there is absolutely a difference, right? I think we have to pay attention to how certain settings, or what certain settings bring out in us. So I haven't, for example, been on Twitter X for years, partly because I know that when I was in that context, what came out of me wasn't what I wanted, right? It wasn't positive. It wasn't growth oriented. for any number of reasons. I'll own that. I'm not pinning that on Twitter or X. That's on me. But I think we have to be aware of how the medium in which we're writing or speaking, what does that lead us to do or say? Because I do think there's the old Marshall McLuhan comment, the medium is the message, right? That could be impacted a lot of ways, but there's definitely an essence of truth there where what we have to work with shapes our words. That's not a bad thing, right? Because I think it depends on what we have to say. We have to decide where's the best place for us to speak with what we have to speak. I do think that what I would come down to as a universal is everybody does need to speak. Now,
Yeah.
some of us might have more words than others, right? I have a brother who's not prone to talking a lot. He will answer questions and he will speak when he needs to, but he's a quiet observer. Those people are often my favorite because when they speak up, they have such wisdom to share compared to those like me who spend a lot of time talking,
Like me.
fill a lot of
Guilty.
space, right?
Yeah.
But I think everybody does have something to say. And so what I would encourage all the listeners is to think about what is it that you have to say? And what have you been uniquely gifted to say to the world? And then let that guide you to where you need to be doing that, whether it's in a podcast, in a blog, in an email. I think that's often the best path rather than picking a medium and figuring out how to talk there, because it's very easy to be kind of like the story of David, right? David goes to fight Goliath, and so Saul and his generals are like, "Hey, put on this armor, right? You definitely need this armor. Like it's the king's armor, the best, right?" And he goes, "No, this isn't going to work, right?" And he chooses an absurd slingshot and a few smooth stones instead, right? Well, but he knew what he had to do, what he had to say, and he let that guide him to what he chose to do, how he chose to frame those things, right? And I think our words are much the same way. Let what you have to say to the world, what only you can say to the world, guide you where you take that and what format to go in.
So much to unpack. One thing I'm going to say is the words need action behind it. If there's action, like David, he hid his words, and if he ran away from the giant and didn't do it, then his words are meaningless. I love that you didn't really say it, but you said it is after you did that, because a lot of people don't take action. Inaction is the worst thing you can do. Making the wrong action is better than inaction. I've talked about this many times. The other thing that I'm learning from you, which I love, Frank, is you talked about conversations with the author of the book. What a qualifier for social media. For example, you just did that with X. I had the conversation with that author on X. It wasn't comfortable for me. I left. So you qualified for you. X or Twitter wasn't good for you at that time. Maybe you come back or not. I think we lose sight of that. Instead of just going, well, here's scathing again. You could have just spiraled off another scathing negative word jumble, and now you got a fight going on. You don't have anything concrete happening. So audience, what Frank, and he's a genius. I'm telling you, this is a word genius. Think about the conversation you're having with the author in any medium you're part of. It's powerful. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Let's talk about your workbook, because we're kind of getting, God, time flew. I'm going to bring you back. Audience, I know I put him on the spot. We got to have part 2 of Frank for sure. But let's have you talk about the workbook.
Yeah. I've got this new workbook coming out called Embrace Your Writer's Block. And I wrote this a year ago, kind of workshopped it, and I've now gotten to a point where I'm actually bringing it out to kind of a hard copy. Super excited about it. The whole idea of it is because I suffered from writer's block for many years. So I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in high school. Went to college, learned a ton of good stuff, got to write some short fiction, learned some of the art of that, even had a book published. There's a book published back in the day called Blue Ice, which is 6 short stories I wrote about hockey. I'm from Canada. I love hockey, so it was kind of a great way for me to kind of get my feet under me and have some fun. And I thought, great, I'm what was I, 23, 24? I've got a book out. Like, I'm getting started. This is great. And I didn't write for 10 years. And I wrote emails. I might have written the occasional blog post or something. I did a master's degree, but even in that, by the time I was finishing for my final paper in a master's degree, that took me 4 years to write. And because I was doing this crippling writer's block. So I went from being somebody who was like, yes, I'm on my way, to being like, well, writing is something I once did. So anyhow, fast forward to now, I've now recovered. I won't go into the whole long story because that would put us over time. But the nuts and bolts of it are, I learned how to recover my creativity thanks to some really good people. The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron was really important. The work of Austin Kleon, Steal Like an Artist, and other things he's written has been really important. But I've done that, and I've now been able to work with several people who are also in that spot. The kind of people who, one client said to me, every time I open up my laptop to write, I just slam it shut again, right? And we got to sit down and work, and a month later, she had 20,000 words, which is just awesome to see. So I've taken on what I learned from my experience and what I've kind of seen with my clients and turned it into a workbook where instead of like 10 days, you could do it in 2 weeks, you could take longer with it, but there's really 10 short reflections followed by 10 writing prompts, and then 3 pages per prompt for the writer to write out. So I actually want them to sit down and write out by hand in the book. So at the end of the day, it's 120 pages or so. They'll have completed more writing than I've given them. But that's the point, because with writer's block, it's really important that you actually write your way through it. You can't read your way out of it. And so that's what the workbook's designed to do, is help people just get started, get comfortable again, rediscover what it was like to have fun writing, then tackle some of those. Okay, what are the hard things in my way? What's stopping me from showing up every day and actually putting words on the page? So I'm excited about that. The people who've gone through it have really liked it, and I'm hoping that it will help a lot more writers keep writing instead of giving up like I was tempted to do for many years.
I've talked to a lot of people that write that have writer's block. It's common. It's a common denominator because of life. And you know what? You developed a tool without AI. Very interesting. Nothing wrong with AI, guys. Girls, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I love hearing there's still tools out there that you can use without AI. Again, AI has its place. We've come to the end here. I like to end with a little improv, a little fun here. So I've got a reservation for you at a restaurant, table of 4. You're going to obviously sit in one of the chairs. Who would you invite, dead or alive? Why are you inviting them to the dinner? And what food would you order?
Am I ordering for the whole table or just for myself?
You're on the whole table. They're going to eat what you order.
Okay. So I would invite my grandfather, whose name was Frank. He was a very important person in my life. I would have to invite W.H. Auden, because he would probably dominate the conversation. There probably would be hard to get a word in edgewise, but just to be able to talk with him would be really cool. Now, 4th person. Who would the 4th person be? I would probably go with another writer named Annie Dillard. She was the first person. Reading her work is what helped me discover as a high schooler, hey, I want to write. Very well read. She could probably hold her own with Auden in terms of conversation. So it would be my grandpa and I would probably be mostly witnessing a lot, but it would be a fun conversation. I'm a big Korean cuisine fan. So my grandfather, I don't know what he would think about that. But if it were up to me, I love how they have all these side dishes, how everything is kind of all comes together in separate plates, very colorful, very tasty food. That's probably what I would pick.
Great conversation food too. It's not like you got a big steak and potato. You got, it's just finger food type things, or spoon foods, I call them. Very cool. And talk about, you'd be an introvert in that table. So would I. I would just sit back, ask a question and go, bring it to me. I love that. Well, thank you. That's a great table. I want to thank you again also for being a blessing on this show. You showed us the words that we say, write, use to communicate with. We could be the servant, or we can be not so servant. And it's a powerful way, and it's a powerful tool to do that. People that are listening are probably going, I got to talk to Frank. How can they connect with you or support you?
Yeah. So best way to connect with me, keep up with me. I have a weekly email that I write. because that's a place where I feel my voice works. So it's called Action Words. So it's actionwords.workwithwords.co would be a place to do that. They can also email me, jfe@workwithwords.co. And it is .co, not .com. About one of those funny ones.
Yeah.
But those are the best ways for people to get a hold of me and see what I'm up to.
Reach out to him. I'll have the information in the show notes as well. You can email him. If you're writing a book, obviously you probably want to reach out, get this workbook. I'm going to do it as well because I'm writing a book, and I do go, hey, mine's going to be unique. It's going to be about my podcast guests. It's going to be, every chapter about a unique story because they're telling me such great stories. And here's your call to action at the end of the show. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, but not for the reasons you think. Here's the power of podcasting I see, and I think more people are starting to adopt this. You listen to Frank and go, holy mackerel, my best friend is writing a book. They need to talk to Frank. Well, you know what? Before you do that, take the link when you subscribe to my channel, take the YouTube link and share it with them and go, hey, Debbie, here's a guy I just listened to, man. He's talking about words and authors and books, and he's got a cool workbook. Here, why don't you listen for 10 or 15 minutes? If you like them, you can connect with them. The truest, greatest gift, we're in December now, December 2024. That's for you people 2 years later listening to this, which I know will happen. That's the greatest Christmas gift you can give because that's a servant's heart. It's a resource. It's a tool to help. And say they reach out to Frank and help start writing their book and they get past the not brain freeze, but the writer's block. I had writer's block for writer's block. How cool is that? So do that and change somebody's life, make a difference. Also, too, comment on the YouTube channel. If it's for Frank, any comments, I'll make sure he gets them. And as for the critique in the podcast, me and Frank want this to be the best podcast for you guys, not for us. We're here to share stuff with you to hopefully make that difference and be that servant's heart. With that being said, me and Frank want to thank you all for watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.